All right, 3, 2. All right, folks, welcome on into Buffalo Game Day Recap. Thad Brown joining me live from a very, very, very hot Miami. Wild game for the Bills. They fall 21-19. Just an insane game. Thad, you know, we'll just start with that. What was it like down there on the sidelines for you?
It was as bad as it looked. I mean, it was brutal. You know, this was, I don't have a list of like hottest and coldest games I've ever been to, but this has got to be one of the top 2 or 3 most uncomfortable hot games that I've been on a sideline for in 23 years of covering this team. And you saw, like, on the field, I mean, guys don't just start dropping like flies for no reason. You know, these teams are have all kinds of medical research and preparation and IVs and ways to hydrate. They know how to get ready for this. And Dawson Knox said they did all the normal stuff they normally do. And I just don't think that you could have been prepared for how hot it was. Even the guys from Miami, Greg Rousseau, Devin Singletary, were talking about how it was, you know, something they never experienced before. And there were other factors that kind of hurt the Bills in this game, too. I mean, they had 90 plays on offense. They had 40 minutes time possession. So their offense was on the field forever. Now, granted, the Miami defense had to be on the field for the same amount of time. But I think they just got exhausted being out there for that long. I mean, Deion Dawkins and Roger Saffold, the only 2 linemen who played the whole game, having to fight with any defensive line, let alone a pretty decent one in Miami, in heat like this for 90 plays. I can't imagine how those guys are walking afterward, you know. So it was hard. It was difficult. Both teams had to deal with it. And the Dolphins made a few more plays. Obviously, the Dolphins came in with a better stacked deck. But, you know, it was pretty bad for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned just the offense being on there for the field. And, you know, you say both teams have to deal with it. I just want to give some major props to what the Dolphins were able to do on defense. Like you said on News 8, typically when, you know, one team is on the field for a long period of time, the other, you know, offense, defense, it's usually the defense that gets tired, worn out, cramps, things like that. Props to Miami for somehow fighting through this. Obviously, they have a little bit of an advantage. You know, the way that they set up that stadium, the Dolphins sideline is on the shade. The Bills are not. You know, Miami, obviously, they train in this in training camp, the 90-degree heat, 100-degree heat, everything like that. But I think, you know, any, you know, quote-unquote excuse you have to give to the Bills, which is valid. They were definitely dealing with that. I mean, they were playing with, you know, their second-string defensive line on the right side the entire game. But you just got to give it tenfold to the Miami Dolphins, I think, in my opinion.
No, 100% agree. You know, and Josh Allen was really, really good. And, you know, how many of those plays were Josh Allen dropping back and just playing street ball? You know, there were multiple plays where the Miami defenders, their corners and safeties, had to cover for 4, 5, 6 seconds. Look, the Dolphins won this game. The Bills have reasonable excuses, things that, you know, went against them, especially injury-wise. But at the end of the day, it was a street fight. It was who could last longer in the heat. And the Dolphins made more plays. You know, they were able to stop the Bills. But the Bills had 3 shots from the 2 and couldn't punch the ball in. From, you know, 1 was from the 1. Josh Allen got tackled for a 2-yard loss. So, yeah, I mean, look, this game should not be, oh, well, the Bills had all these things that didn't work for them, and that's why they lost. No, the Dolphins made plays. You know, now, did the Dolphins have advantages in personnel? Sure they did. But they made plays at the end of the game, so I agree with you. You know, give credit to them for that. I mean, even you know, going back to the heat thing, even guys like Greg Rousseau, who is practicing the heat, you know, he went to Miami. He talked about how, like, you didn't have to, you know, get hurt or get hit. You would just go down, you know, cramping up in this game. So it was one of the more unique circumstances for a Bills football game. The Dolphins did a better job at it. End of the story.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you know, the street fight, Josh Allen, things like that. That first half, and, you know, the second half is weird. I don't know if you can take too much from the, you know, the offensive line, things like that. That first half, it almost seemed like the play was, all right, we're going to have one defender. We're going to let him get to Josh unabated. He's going to have to pump fake him, get by him, and then, all right, now we're in business. That was the way that first half felt like. You know, Spencer Brown had a really tough first half. Eventually, he left the game with heat illness, so who knows how much of that was just strictly performance-based and how much was that just the heat getting to him first. But the offensive line looked a little bit rough. Josh Allen able to finally, you know, get through it. You know, they went down for 2 touchdown drives in that first half. But, you know, the sack fumble costed them, and, you know, the Dolphins were able to hold on to it and eventually, you know, make plays in the second half. Going to the, you know, the football side of things, Thad, what were you kind of seeing out there on the field there?
Well, look, Josh Allen was amazing. You know, there were a few mistakes. You talk about the sack fumble. He's throwing the ball that time, so you cut him a little slack. But again, the quarterback's got to protect the ball, especially inside the 10-yard line. But other than that, I mean, how many times did Josh Allen make a fall-away throw? He had a nice floater to Isaiah McKenzie that got the Bills into the red zone. I think that was in the second half. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I mean, there were multiple plays where Josh Allen was at his best. He took the stupid personal foul and then got out of it with a 10-yard scramble. I mean, you know, I really thought at the end of this game that the Dolphins were going to give Josh Allen too many chances and Josh Allen was going to beat him. Obviously, we talked about how, you know, the offense ran out of gas, but I loved what Allen did. I was a little disappointed in the Miami game plan. I thought the Bills outcoached the Dolphins, not because their coaching was great, but because the Dolphins' coaching was just terrible. I mean, you've got a Bills team that had their entire secondary out, and the Dolphins ran the ball as many times as they let Tua throw it. I think it was 17 runs to 18 Tua passes. That's brutal. They gave up. They had to call 2 timeouts going in to score the go-ahead touchdown. You had the brutal punting the ball off of your own guy's butt in your own end zone. I mean, it's not like you don't ever practice. Well, you know, occasionally we might have a punt from inside our 5. We might want to work on that. So, you know, the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel, I know he's a young coach. He's new. Not a great game for him. A little fortunate they were able to get out of it. You know, I think the other thing that hurt the Bills, at some point, the lack of secondary experience was going to bite them, and it did on the long Jalen Waddle play. You know, I mean, you talk about all the good things the Bills did in this game. I think we can point to 3 really bad negatives that I can't think flip this game. Maybe 4 if you want to count the fumble. The end of first half situation where Josh Allen said he was trying to spike it, but he dropped the ball, was afraid he'd get intentional grounding, so he tried to complete a pass. What he probably should have done there, and, you know, obviously I've got 8 hours of hindsight to think about it, he probably should have just chucked the ball out of bounds over Diggs' head. That cost the Bills points. You had the missed field goal in the second half. Tyler Bass, who we're not going to talk about much in this show, you know, he's been Mr. Dependable, but they have a spot where they really need him, and he couldn't connect on that one kick today. That hurt, obviously. And then the Jalen Waddle 3rd and 22. I don't care who's on the field. That's inexcusable. You know, I mean, unless you're going to give Tua 8 hours to throw the ball, that's a play where no matter who's in the game, you got to be able to stop it. And look, in experience, you know, if it's Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, there's no way that play happens. But these are the kind of things you get when you got backups in, and it did, in the end, burn the Bills.
And you talk about the coaching thing, when Christian Benford went out of the game and they were down to, you know, rookies and undrafted rookies, guys getting their first snaps, Jamarcus Ingram, you know, they started running the ball on that first drive. That was certainly questionable. And then the secondary depth, not only that, you know, that deep Jalen Waddle play, but the second touchdown, not maybe the secondary's fault, but you got to think that maybe if Micah Hyde, if Jordan Poyer are in there, they can pop that ball free, get in there just a little bit quicker than Jaquan Johnson, Damar Hamlin. You know, this was our first test. We have seen these guys through training camp. These guys have been in the system for a long time. We were all wondering how that was going to fare out. You know, these guys actually getting their first shot. And, you know, they didn't get a ton of chances just because how much, you know, the time of possession, the plays and things like that. But the few times when they really needed to step up, it didn't happen. You know, the Dolphins, obviously, they just torched the Ravens, so clearly they have the offensive firepower to exploit a secondary like that. We'll see coming down the road whether or not, you know, obviously Micah Hyde being out for the season is going to be an issue. We'll see how much just of an issue that is going to be.
One thing I like defensively is that even with the guys out, you had a number of players who stepped up, made some big plays. Matt Milano had a couple good run stops. Tremaine Edmonds, the big run stop to open the second half that kind of ended that Dolphins drive. Greg Rousseau had a sack that ended a drive, the Teddy Bridgewater drive. So, you know, even though the Bills were vulnerable in the secondary, the guys who were in, enough of them stepped up and made plays to where this defense, you know, put together a very manageable, respectable effort. Now, I want to hear from the players a little bit here. Let's, you know, hear from the Bills in terms of how this game got away from them. It was a loss. It was close, you know, but in the end, you know, Josh Allen's going to talk about it. The Bills had a chance to steal it, and it was really themselves. They have the blame for not getting it done.
You know, we got to finish drives. I think third down we were all right. Red zone we weren't very good. We got to find a way to get it in the end zone there, and you know, we really beat ourselves tonight. You know, credit to them. They had a really good game plan. They came out and they did what they had to do. But there's obviously plays that we want back, and that's going to happen over the course of every single game, this one especially.
I think we'll learn things that we're really good about today. One of those is the guts and heart and the intangibles of our football team, and I think we'll learn some things that weren't very good today, which led to the result that we got. I mean, when you look at the difference in the game, I think we had 400 some odd yards, almost 500 yards to their 212 or 21 roughly, and you should win those games.
We got high character guys like this. Adversity reveals character. This is all just adversity, and I'm excited to see how we respond. Real men, they respond to things like this, and I'm excited to see how we respond.
All right, AJ, last play of the game, we talked to Isaiah McKenzie about what he was thinking there, and he said he was trying to get upfield, I was trying to get out of bounds, and the fact that he was just, kind of talking about doing both things at the same time shows you what a difficult spot he was in. I mean, it was a no-win situation. If you go out of bounds, stop the clock, you're not nearly close enough to where it's an effective, getting yourself a chance to make the kick. If you get upfield, which is what he tried to do, the clock runs out on you. So he was in a no-win situation. He did say, look, if I had to do it over again, I probably would have just gotten upfield as far as I could, put the ball down on the hash mark, got down, and then tried to let the offense come up and spike the ball, which, I talked to Isaiah for, a good 5-10 minutes in the locker room about what he could have done, what he should have done. We were talking about maybe pitching the ball out of bounds, backwards to stop the clock possibly. It was just a tough spot for him, and you could tell he was broken up about it. I mean, he was out of breath on the field for, a few minutes after the game was over, exhausted in the locker room. I'll give McKenzie a lot of credit, though. He was the first guy who spoke to media after the game, Gabe Davis is lying on the ground in the locker room next to him, flat on his back, and McKenzie stepped up, he answered questions for quite a while in there. So kudos to McKenzie. Obviously he didn't make the play at the end of the game, but the way he handled himself afterward, I have a lot of respect for.
And you talk about the Heat just obviously, making these guys cramp up and things like that. We talk about McKenzie having to deal with all of these things in his head, whether or not to get out, whether or not to go down, things like that. Josh Allen at the end of the second half. That mental toll of that Heat, I don't know if it's to blame for, the potential mental mistakes, but that certainly plays a factor in it. And I want to highlight, Tua Tagovailoa. He's a guy that's talked a lot about on Twitter by NFL media, Miami media, Bills media, things like Bills, fans. Nobody wants to give him credit for anything. Every, big play, comeback he makes against the Ravens is, the Ravens' fault, things like that. Tua, he got banged up. He got, whether or not it was a back injury, reportedly the NFL is going to look into whether or not they followed the proper concussion protocols, things like that. But, whether or not he should have been back in that game, he did come back in that game. He made the throws he needed to throw. There weren't, no interceptions. The Bills did have a couple chances to make picks, but, Tua, I thought he played a good game to potentially, silence, maybe some of those doubters. It's not going to happen because Bills Mafia at this point isn't going to give Tua credit for anything until maybe he raises the Lombardi Trophy down the line. But I thought this was a nice game from Tua, getting it done given all the circumstances.
So you're going to look at this Tua game, 13-18, 186 and a touchdown, took one sack. That's not impressive, especially against a Bills secondary where a lot of guys were out. But, you look at the possessions, the Dolphins had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They had 8 possessions. The last one was the safety, the punt off the guy's butt where they really weren't trying to move the ball. So in 7 possessions, they scored 3 touchdowns. One of those possessions, Tua wasn't really in for it because he got hurt. So Tua really had 6 legitimate possessions, scored touchdowns on 3 of them. Granted, one of them was a short field off a fumble. 13 of 18, 186. In a normal game, if the guy throws 30 passes, he probably throws for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, and people are like, oh, okay, that's probably what it should have looked like. So I thought Tua was fine. I'll tell you what, when he went down and Teddy Bridgewater came in, it felt like he was getting a groove there. And I think all the interruptions in this game, the injury timeouts, the guys who cramped up, I think they really hurt both offenses because it got both offenses out of a flow. And I think, the Dolphins need to be in that routine where it's snap the ball, drop back, out, snap the ball, drop back, out, rhythm on time for their offense to really hum because, on the first touchdown drive, you saw it, or the first long touchdown drive, and I think towards the end of that half when Tua got hurt, you saw it too. So I'm not going to say I was impressed by Tua. The Bills, like we said, were down to, second and third stringers in the secondary, but I agree with you. He's not going to get a lot of credit for gutting this out. I think he did a pretty good job.
And we always talk about what we can learn from this game. I've already seen on Twitter, this game being compared to the Patriots game last year. The weird weather, obviously dealing with the wind there. I saw it compared to the Buccaneers game, where they got down early, they stormed all the way back, and things were, people still feeling pretty good in the locker room. And you wrote in your column, last week, how does this Bills team get beat? Well, this time it took a completely depleted secondary, 100-degree weather, no offensive line. So, Thad, what are you kind of taking away from this game for the Bills?
Yeah, this is this is going to be a loss for the Bills, but there are a lot of positives to take from this. I mean, number one, in terms of winning the division, which is step one in any NFL season, the closest division rival at home facing your team on a short week with the Bills missing all kinds of guys, not only before the game but during the game, and Miami still won the game by like the slimmest of margins. If you're the Bills, or if you're looking ahead for Buffalo, you've got to feel like this team is clearly still the better team in the division, and there will be a lot of positive things ahead moving forward for the Bills. They're fine. This is going to be a loss because of circumstances, finger quotes, but this team is still a Super Bowl favorite. Still in my mind the team that's most likely to win the division. We have you bust my chops about a Dolphins wild card bet, like, oh, maybe they win the division. No, my money on the Dolphins getting a wild card feels great after this game, even though the Bills lost and right now Miami has a game and a half lead in the division. I think the Bills are fine. They got to get guys healthy, and look, Micah Hyde's not coming back. Jordan Poyer's coming back, Tre'Davious White's coming back, Dane Jackson we assume is coming back, Jordan Phillips is coming. All these guys are going to come back. Micah Hyde's not coming back. So that's going to have to be something they're going to have to deal with all season long, seeing if it's Jaquan Johnson, most likely, or DeMar Hamlin, who can replace him. So, this game does not end without questions or concerns for the Bills, but I'm not going to look at this game and think, whoa, this is a turning point. Miami's taking over in the division. No. This game affirms that Buffalo is the better team. They just got to get healthy and get out of this unbelievable weather.
And I will just say with that secondary, Kaiir Elam getting his first start, it's tough to tell cornerbacks, performance, but he didn't seem to get beat too much, didn't have any of those really penalties. So I think, a first game starting for Elam, I think you got to feel pretty good about that too.
Yeah, I think so. I think overall, you don't walk away from this game feeling bad about the secondary. I want to go back and look at the film and see what happened. Tyreek Hill had 2 catches. This is not a guy who has that few numbers very often. Now, again, Miami ran only 39 plays. So you're going to look at their offensive stats and say, wow, look what the Bills did. They held Tyreek Hill to 2 catches. Well, if the Dolphins have 60 plays, maybe the game goes differently. So regardless, I think bottom line, more good than bad out of the guys who played for the Bills. But obviously it's a loss and they got to get healthy,
Yeah, exactly. So the Bills have the Ravens next week in Week 4. Another big test in this early season gauntlet for the Bills, trying to get through with all these injuries. Thad, any final words for us?
I think, the Ravens are going to be a difficult one like this game has been, a whole different, ball of wax because of the way they run the ball and Lamar Jackson. The Bills came into this game against a quarterback that Miami fans think is an MVP. Bills are going to see a quarterback next week that everybody thinks can be an MVP. So now the Bills done a good job against Lamar Jackson, but that's with the guys who normally start. We don't know how many of those guys are going to come back. Again, this season is still full steam ahead, Super Bowl favorite, all that stuff. You lose again in Baltimore next week. If you get some players back, maybe we start talking about some worries, but to me, this team is still just fine, and we'll see if they can corral Lamar Jackson like they have in the past.
Yeah, and another big X factor. Who's going to be Lamar Jackson in practice? I know it's been Isaiah McKenzie in practice before. He's got to play a lot more offense, so I don't know what they're going to do there.
That's a great call. I think McKenzie probably still gets most of the job. I think Khalil Shakir maybe, although he doesn't have anywhere near the quickness that McKenzie does, let alone Lamar Jackson. But yes, a good thing that we will talk about with the Bills on Wednesday as we get ready for the Ravens next week. So one other thing I want to say here too, that Bills offensive line late in the game, you got Tommy Doyle, who, as Deion Dawkins said, the last time he played guard was never. So, or at least right guard. You've got Greg Manns, the third string center in. You've got Quessenberry at tackle. I mean, the protection wasn't awful from my point of view. Correct me if I'm wrong watching the broadcast. I mean, I know Josh was running a lot, but it just felt like the game plan was we're going to play street ball and hope Josh Allen saves us. He very nearly did. I thought the O-line, for who was in there, played all right.
Did you get deja vus to watching training camp for the first week there?
You know what? I thought that. I had that exact feeling. Like, here we go again with, the Bills in training camp. That was Saffold being out and Deion missed a couple days. Yes, it did feel like Josh Allen behind a training camp offensive line trying to figure things out. Now, look, Allen is in a spot right now, and I talked about it a little bit. Mentally, the way he processes the game is as good as I've ever seen it. I think we saw that again here. I really don't know until I go back and watch it on film. But he's in such a good zone. It don't matter who's in front of him. He can beat yours with his and his with yours. So as long as the Bills have 17 on the field, no matter who else is around them, and really 14 and 42, I mean, as long as they have those 3 guys, they have a chance to win every game, including playoff games. It just would help if you got more of those other guys back.
Yeah, they've got those 3 guys and not a ton left. So we'll see if they can get healthy for next week in Baltimore for that game against the Ravens. That'll do it for us tonight on Buffalo Game Day Recap. Thanks for watching on RochesterFirst.com. We'll be doing this after every game, certainly the 1 o'clock games. We'll see about the rest with the schedule. But for Thad Brown joining us live from Miami, I'm AJ Feldman here in News 8 Studios. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your football weekend.